Picture this, it's the summer of 1775. The air in Philadelphia is thick with tension. Just a few months earlier, the first shots of a conflict that would change the world were fired at Lexington and Concord. But here's something you might not know. Even after blood had been spilled, most American colonists didn't want to break away from Great Britain. They still saw themselves as loyal subjects of King George III. Their goal wasn't independence, it was reconciliation. They wanted their rights as Englishmen respected, and they hoped, they could fix things with the mother country. This hope took the form of a document, a final, heartfelt plea for peace. It was called the Olive Branch Petition. Drafted primarily by John Dickinson, a moderate voice from Pennsylvania, this petition was the colonists' last-ditch effort to avoid an all-out war. It was polite. It was respectful, and it was addressed directly to the king. The colonists bypassed Parliament, which they saw as the source of their problems with all its taxes and regulations. They believed if they could just talk to the king directly, man to man, he would understand, he would see the justice in their cause, reign in Parliament, and restore harmony. The petition wasn't a list of demands, it was a letter expressing loyalty and a desire to return to the way things were before the conflict. It assured the king of their sincere and dutiful attachment to his person, family, and government. It asked him to find a way to resolve the disputes, to protect them from what they saw as Parliament's tyranny. Imagine the scene, delegates from the 13 colonies, gathered in the Second Continental Congress, debating every word, knowing that the future hung in the balance. They signed it on July 8, 1775, and sent it across the Atlantic on a ship named the Peace and Harmony. The name itself was a prayer. Now, let's cross the ocean to London. King George III gets word that this petition is on its way. But he doesn't see it as a peace offering. From his perspective, the colonists were in open rebellion. They had attacked his soldiers. They had formed their own Congress and were raising an army. Just a few days before the petition even arrived, the king issued the Proclamation of Rebellion. He declared the colonies to be in a state of open and avowed rebellion and called on all officials to suppress such rebellion and to bring the traitors to justice. So, when the Olive Branch Petition finally reached London in late August, what happened? The king refused to even look at it. He wouldn't receive the colonial delegates who brought it. He considered the Continental Congress an illegal body, and any document from them was, in his eyes, illegitimate. The door to reconciliation, which the colonists had so carefully and hopefully opened, was slammed shut. And it was locked from the other side. This rejection was a massive turning point. It was a political earthquake that sent shockwaves through the colonies. Think about it from the perspective of an ordinary colonist, a farmer in Massachusetts, a merchant in Virginia. For years, they had been told that their troubles were with Parliament, not the king. They had toasted the king's health, hung his portrait in their homes. They believed he was their protector. But his refusal to even read their petition was a personal, brutal rejection. It shattered that long-held belief. The king wasn't their protector, he was siding with their enemies. The news of the king's decision spread like wildfire through colonial newspapers and pamphlets. For the moderates in Congress, men like John Dickinson who had championed the petition, it was a devastating blow. Their strategy had failed. They had run out of peaceful options. For the radicals, men like John Adams and Samuel Adams who had been quietly arguing for independence all along, this was the moment they had been waiting for. The king's rejection was the ultimate proof that their cause was just. They could now turn to their fellow colonists and say, "See, we tried. We begged for peace. We offered the olive branch, and they threw it back in our faces. There is no other path forward but independence." The timing couldn't have been more dramatic. Just as news of the king's rejection was solidifying, another powerful voice entered the conversation. In January 1776, a pamphlet called Common Sense was published, written by Thomas Paine. It wasn't like anything anyone had ever read. It wasn't a dry legal argument. It was a fiery, passionate, and brutally logical case for independence. Paine didn't just criticize Parliament, he attacked the very idea of monarchy and hereditary rule. He called King George a royal brute. Paine's words electrified the colonies. Common sense argued that it was absurd for a tiny island to rule a vast continent. It laid out a vision of a new kind of nation, a republic based on liberty and the consent of the governed. And it framed the choice in stark, simple terms. The time for debate was over. The king had already declared war on them. Their only options were to fight for their freedom or accept the chains of slavery. The impact of common sense, arriving on the heels of the Olive Branch Petition's failure, was profound. It took the disillusionment and anger that colonists felt and channeled it into a powerful, unified movement for independence. The conversation in taverns, in town squares, and in homes across the 13 colonies changed. Before, the question was, how can we fix our relationship with Britain? Now, the question became, how do we form our own nation? The rejection of the Olive Branch Petition essentially cleared the path for the Declaration of Independence. It removed the last major obstacle, the lingering emotional attachment to the king and the hope for a peaceful resolution. The Continental Congress, which had been so divided just months before, now moved with a new sense of purpose. The king's actions had united them. He had shown them that there was no middle ground. They were either rebels to be crushed, or they were the founders of a new nation. By the summer of 1776, a year after the Olive Branch Petition was sent, the mood had completely transformed. On July 4th, the delegates in Philadelphia, many of whom had signed that last plea for peace, put their names to a very different document. The Declaration of Independence wasn't a petition, it was a defiant statement. It listed their grievances, not against Parliament, but directly against the king, accusing him of a long train of abuses and usurpations designed to establish an absolute tyranny over the state. It's a powerful lesson in history. A single decision, a refusal to read a letter, can change the course of history. The rejection of the Olive Branch Petition wasn't just a political miscalculation. It was the final push the American colonies needed to trade their identity as British subjects for a new one as free and independent Americans. It transformed a family squabble into a revolutionary war and turned a plea for peace into the birth of a nation. The olive branch was rejected, and in its place, the seeds of liberty were sown. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history as fascinating as I do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the past. Let me know in the comments what you think was war inevitable, or could King George have saved his American empire? See you next time.